There are so many games released back when I was younger that I unfortunately missed out on due to a myriad of reasons, resulting in it being difficult for me to attain said games. One of those games was the infamous TimeSplitters, a game which always looked so mystical and exciting, and I never got to play. I knew of it, and I was vaguely aware of the premise, but as I got older and new games continued to release, it got lost to time in my memories and I never ended up trying it. Well, when browsing the shelves of the retro room, which isn't a real thing and it's just old games I want to play, this one came to mind, and here we are. So, what is TimeSplitters? After spending a few hours in the game and beating each of the levels a few times, I can confidently say, I'm not entirely sure, but it's fun. The game's menu and presentation is great. The aesthetic feels so early 2000s PS2 era. Anyone who's been on this channel very long knows I put a heavy emphasis on the execution of the menu and presentation of a game. It's your first impression, so it's really important. I had literally no idea what I was doing on my first playthrough. I'd never seen any of these characters or levels before, so it was a really fresh and exciting campaign to play through. First, let's talk about the story. There isn't one. Instead, we get a series of missions, each set in a different time period where we play as one of two unique selectable characters per mission. It's always a choice between a male character and a female character. This is a very arcade-like game. The premise is ambitious in some ways and reserved in others. To be a game that was released in October of the year 2000, I've gotta say, it holds up pretty well. Let's go mission by mission really quick. Each mission is named first after the year it's set in, followed by the location itself. The first of which is called 1935 Tomb. The two characters we have to choose from here are Captain Ash, the alcoholic, or Lady Jane, the angry dress-wearing Kohl's employee. There's no lore for any of these characters beyond how they look as far as I'm aware, and who you play has no effect on the gameplay. The game is clearly designed with a multiplayer functionality in mind, so that's the reason for the colorful characters to choose from. I'm not going to cover all of the characters, but all you need to know is that all of the male characters are like quirky cartoons, and all of the female characters are social media ethos. Anyway, the first level features you running through an Egyptian tomb in 1935, killing cultists, mummies, and zombies in order to retrieve an artifact and put it where it belongs. The reason it's not where it should be is due to the alien race known as the TimeSplitters going in and messing with things in the timeline where they shouldn't. You'll see them appear by sort of portaling via these green effects. They normally start appearing after you've retrieved the item you needed to get and are headed back to the exit, though I've seen them appear before that. Interestingly enough, this was the hardest level in the game for me. Yeah, they got easier from here for some reason. I was actually charmed by these old graphics, and even the old school music sounds like it's straight from Crash Bandicoot. Anyways, we get the Ankh and start heading back to return it. This is when the TimeSplitters start showing up to stop us. Fighting through them, we drop it back off where it goes, and we move on to the next level. From 1935 Egypt all the way to 1970 Chinatown, this actually feels a lot more like I'm playing an old PS2 FPS. I can't quite explain it, but the look and feel of the environment just screams PS2 game to me. Doesn't this kind of remind you of that one level from Nightfire? Doesn't hurt that we get a double-barrel shotgun here either. Our objective is to track down a briefcase and return it where it's supposed to be. Of course, when we finally find it, the TimeSplitters come out and start chasing us. I really enjoyed the design of the level, except that its confusing layout was making it really hard for me to find where to go. After a while, I finally got it and we completed the level. Most of the levels are really as simple as that. Now we're finally heading 5 years into the future of 2005, where we're bringing down a cyber den. Yeah, remember, this was released in 2000 and technically developed in the late 90s. Back in the year 2000, a lot of people thought we weren't far from stuff like cyber dens being a thing. It's really less of a cyber den and more of like an old dilapidated warehouse. There's nothing really cyber about it. I do enjoy the design though. The tunnels have a cool look to them. Oh, and also we get a chain gun. Now is a good time to bring up that this game actually plays really well. No, really, I love the way it feels to play old shooters like this. It was a little wonky at first, but once I got used to it, I was loving it. Next up, we're heading back in time again to a village in the 1950s, and it is exactly what it sounds like. A small European village, seemingly in the 1950s, and the good news is that the double-barrel shotgun is back. I enjoy the nighttime aesthetic of this level a lot, but it's around this point we start to realize that this game is just the same thing every mission. Our objective is to find a cursed artifact and bring it back for deeper research, which is about as deep as our objectives ever go. One sentence reasons to kill a bunch of creatures. More zombies and thugs and other killable NPCs, but I gotta give respect to one major thing, and that's the lack of reused assets across these levels. There may only be 10 of them, but each one features a unique setting and design. Moving on from the village, we head to 1985 to see a chemical plant. The interesting thing about this level, at least to me, is that it's the most vertical so far. There's a lot of aiming and looking around, which is fitting since we start this round with a sniper rifle. This one really does feel like an old Bond game, just the way it opens and the fact that we're killing some kind of nameless mercenary henchman. Again, totally unique design, and I'm loving it. Although this mission was a lot harder than the ones before it. Once you get the hang of it and familiarize yourself with using the grenade launcher, it's a little easier. From there, we make our way to the distant future of 2020. Yeah, something Corona. We're on an alien planet called Planet X, which is actually a real theory that there's a hidden planet in our solar system with aliens on it. Whether or not this is based on that, I have no idea. The level is really fun, and probably one of the better layouts overall. I enjoy the rocky canyon look, and the green lighting really complements it given green and red are artistic complements. This is also where we get to play with a variety of futuristic alien weapons too. More than I was able to properly handle, to be honest. I couldn't even decide which ones I liked before the level was over. I overall like the lighting in this level the best, and I think this may even be the largest map in the game too. It's definitely the most open of them all. Completing that, we finally get to my favorite level of the whole game, 1965 Mansion. I could just say I'm a Resident Evil fanboy and you'd get why this is my favorite level, but I'm obviously going to elaborate on it a bit more. We start in a dark, dimly lit room surrounded by the undead. Creatures which I mentioned previously, but really shines brightest in this level. They can't die unless you get a headshot and will just keep getting back up over and over. So since they keep spawning in, if you don't dispose of them, you'll get overwhelmed really quickly. And the aesthetic, I mean, come on. The double-barrel shotgun, the red carpeted rooms, the dark claustrophobic spaces, the moonlit night skybox. This is a love letter to old school horror games and an arcade FPS game, and I love it. They went all out too. We've got a hangman's noose outside, a spooky kitchen, and even some underground catacombs to wander through. It's just the best level in my opinion. We're nearing the end of the game now with only 2 levels left, and unfortunately, the next one is the worst in the game. For the penultimate level, we're going to the year 2000, the current year for the game's release, and it's just a docks level. Shipping containers and office buildings, that's about it. This is the only other level of the game where you'll be aiming up a lot to take out snipers, so that's cool. But for such a colorful game, this realistic and minimal location feels incredibly out of place, surrounded by all those other levels anyway. Even the chemical plant, which was also a more modern, realistic looking level, at least had an over-the-top setting and explosions everywhere. Despite getting a grenade launcher in this level, it feels like a recycled multiplayer map from a way more boring shooter. The verticality and open design are probably the only things I really like about this map. I'm thinking maybe they wanted to ground the player to reality in the penultimate level before springing this final mission on us, because we're going back to the future. 2035 Spaceways, where we literally play as a robot. This mission dials in the colorful nature of TimeSplitters up to 11. Lasers, robots, hovercars, and a spaceport for tourists. Now we're talking. They went all out on this last mission too, as we fight through a horde of Timesplitter enemies to get our MacGuffin and board a literal rocket ship to escape. It's cartoonish, over the top, and perfect for this era of games. We even get the minigun back, which is easily the best weapon in the game. It's a pretty straightforward mission, and I do love the way they laid it all out. Like I said, I have respect for the level of detail and work that went into creating this many original assets for one game. Boarding the spaceship, we take off, and the credits roll. So that's TimeSplitters. There's pretty much no story, it's just a series of fun and colorful levels meant to be enjoyed for what they are. Which brings us to what I assume the real appeal of this game was back in the day. TimeSplitters is definitely more of a multiplayer game than a single player one. So I roped my roommate Sean into hooking up a second controller and rocking some split-screen multiplayer with me. We had some fun, but it was exactly what you'd expect. The same maps from the single player, but with you and a friend up against bots. Given the game's age, there's obviously no online play, but it does support up to 4 different players on split screen. Other than that, there's one more thing we can do to enjoy our time with TimeSplitters. After completing the game, we can go in and do challenges, which are just different requirements for a map to complete it. Like this one, where we shoot 50 zombie heads in under 2 minutes. All of them are pretty much the same thing. Okay, so the big question, is TimeSplitters worth playing for yourself? I'm gonna have to give a difficult answer here and just say no. If you played it back in the day and have some nostalgic ties to it, then of course, it's worth re-experiencing. If you haven't played it before and you're looking for a cool old school FPS shooter from this era to go back and play, however, this probably wouldn't be one I'd recommend. Don't get me wrong, it was fun and I did enjoy my time with it, but there's better games out there that I'd recommend trying over this one, and a lot of them at that. Without a story or narrative of any kind, there's very little to latch onto here, and I just don't think there's enough content to justify the time you'd spend playing it. I've heard the series really picks up with the sequels, so maybe I'll check those out soon. As for TimeSplitters 1, I'm recommending we leave this one on the retro room shelf. Thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to drop some recommendations for what you'd like to see covered next in the comments, and consider becoming a member of the channel if you want access to exclusive weekly updates, monthly live streams, early access, and just more interaction and influence on the direction of the channel. As always, I hope to see you in the next video, and that's all I've got for you.